You got to turn it on. Here, let me see. Hey, everybody, welcome to Beyond the Letter. Give us a second. Let us get some AC so that Lana doesn't get cooked.
Oh, no.
It's not on.
Was it?
It's, let's get this AC. There we go. Set. We're not setting it to heat. We don't want to do that. There we go. Now we get a 64 in here. How's that?
Perfect.
Is that?
No, it's going to be freezing.
What are you doing?
Tropical.
That's what I was going to say. Where you're at, how often do you realistically get like AC and stuff like that?
No, I mean, we were in the Amazon and they were like out, like they couldn't even survive. So when you're in the Amazon in Juazeiro, it was like, no, seriously, they were out. They're like, we can't even go outside and step out in the sun. It gets hot where we're at. And Brazil, I don't know if it's the sun's closer or what, but that sun is brutal.
The
you
UV?
Get blisters. Like you literally get sun blisters, which that doesn't happen. I'm Mexican. I don't burn,
Yeah.
But it does there. It's rough.
No way. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But it's a big country. So what parts are the hottest? The whole country's hot, or like the Amazon?
No. It's like America where you have the different demographics, and down south is actually cool and cold, and you can wear jackets. Amazon and the humidity because of the water, that is hot. It's hot in the Amazon, and we weren't even there during the hot season. And then to the Amazon, the Northeast, that's like desert. It's like, real desert, dry, arid heat. And then Rio de Janeiro, and that's hot there as well. And you're near the water, so the humidity, and it's pretty ridiculous. And a lot of those places don't have air conditioning. So it's not even an option.
Yeah. Oh.
It's rough.
Yeah. Well, everybody, welcome to Beyond the Letter. Thanks for joining us. This is a special episode because we have, at our church, one of our missionaries who we support, but just an incredible person that tons of churches support and are partnered with, and individuals are partnered with, is Lana Vasquez from Life Impact International. And believe it or not, you were our first guest ever on Beyond the Letter 2 years ago.
No.
Yeah, you were the first one.
Wow, honored.
And ever since then, I mean, legitimately, the team would actually know if we pulled it up, but I'm trying to think what actual like episode you were of Beyond the Letter. It probably wouldn't be a hard thing. I'm looking it up real quick because I want to know the answer to that, because you came on relatively soon. If I just let me go on YouTube real quick, Beyond the Letter, and put your name.
I just remember you making me cry. You guys asked me some questions and made me cry. Episode 4, she said.
Episode 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first month of our podcast you were on, and it was over 2 years ago, because that would have been September of 2023. So
195,000 views.
195,000 views.
Wow.
And so...
Did we make any money off of that or anything?
Maybe like $100.
I'm like,
Hopefully you guys did. I mean, we linked Life Impact. Hopefully someone went on the website and donated or something like that. But so you were our first guest ever. You were on our 4th episode ever. Now we would have over 100 episodes. We'd have like 120 episodes. You were our 4th episode, which was an honor. And everybody loved that episode. And so you were in town, and you just led one of our staff chapels right now. And then I thought it would be a great time to recap, follow up, because like 2 years ago at our first episode, like you were barely scratching into Brazil. So for those that don't know Lana, she's an incredible missionary that rescues children from sex slavery, builds orphanages, invests in families, mothers, homes, is incorporating church activity in what she's doing to build up not only local communities, but create a fervor for Jesus. I mean, just you're an all-around force for the Lord, and we're so honored to know you. And your primary work has been in Thailand over the years, and over the past, 5 years now? God has placed you in Brazil. And so you're doing incredible work in Thailand and Brazil. But 2 years ago when we met, you were like entering kindergarten of Brazil. And 2 years later, like you are, full on, like, that's what I want you to fill in, right? Because I know what those things are, but what has been going on since last time we talked? You shared a little bit with our team, but originally when you were on, because I remember that episode, you were just really, not only did you tell incredible stories about how you guys rescued children and some stories around that, but also like this fervency you have for Brazil.
Yeah.
And then to see it a lot of it come to fruition has been incredible. So, you're in City of God, you're in favelas, you're in the Amazon. I mean, just crushing it. So share a little bit about what kind of past 2 years journey, if you can think in that time frame, has been like.
Okay, yes, it has been full on. I say it like this: Brazil is a beast, and I always put it like this. I was faithful with what was in my hands, which is Thailand and Burma, all the while carrying Brazil in my heart. Brazil was the first time I had ever heard about children being exploited. I'd heard about the hundreds of thousands of street kids in the streets of Sao Paulo, Brazil. I heard there's a missionary that came through, said you can walk around the street seeing 5-year-olds walking around sniffing glue to kill the hunger pains, not just because they're hooked on drugs, but because glue is cheaper than food in Brazil, and there's more kids on the streets than there is food in the dumpsters to feed these kids, and that the police basically line up the kids and massacre them, and you could smell the bodies of rotting children in the sewages of Sao Paulo, that they're bad for business, so the store owners would pay off the police to just massacre them. And I just remember hearing this for the first time. I'd never heard anything like this. And I'm sitting in this little itty-bitty church, 150 people, missionary, just sharing this, and I'm just weeping. And the pastor's wife came over and said, Lana, what do you want to do for the Lord? Out of my heart said, I want to work with exploited children internationally. Yeah. And God used that missionary from Brazil to put these children in my heart. And I remember my aunt looked at me, she said, you do? And I said, I guess that's what I said. And that's how the search for what's going on with children, slavery, trafficking, exploitation started. And during that time, after that, I started to hear about Thailand. And that's how I went to Thailand. But Thailand was only supposed to be 2 months. It was never supposed to be my life. Now, 24 years later, that's home. But all the while, I always kept Brazil in my heart and those street kids. And every year, I would say to God, is it time yet for Brazil? Is it time yet? And I'd hear, no, not yet, no, not yet. So I stayed in Thailand in sheer obedience. Like, I never loved the country, the weather, the food. I still don't like the food. I know everyone's going to kill me. Everyone loves Thai food.
Everyone, or anything like that?
I like pad Thai and cashew nut chicken and mango and sticky rice. That is it.
What are you?
That is all.
Well, you're Mexican, so they don't have tacos in Thailand or anything like that.
No beef. You should see our cows. They're all sucked up and anorexic. There's no beef, just pork. And like, that's it, And so I didn't like anything and stayed in sure obedience. But when it came time and I say it like this, I kind of laid my dream, what was in my heart on the altar, and stayed in Thailand for a good 15 years, I'd say, even longer. And then finally I heard it's time for Brazil. And when that happened, it's like I didn't even go like this, and everything just exploded. Everything that I needed, everything, the people, the right people. And so we went to Brazil. And, it was funny because I thought, okay, my vision was exploited children internationally, Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu nations of the world, generations that have this kind of oppression or this kind of exploitation that are sold into trafficking and different things. I never thought Brazil wasn't in that kind of thing. So everyone said, Brazil, Brazil. And what I didn't know until I got there, Thailand's #1 in the world for children that are forced into prostitution. What I didn't know was Brazil was #2. And when I got there, actually, we found out, actually, my Thai daughter, she's in the studio with us right now, and we were there. She came with me on our first spy trip, and we went from town to town, and she looked over at me and she said, Mom, Brazil's not #2. It's tied with Thailand for #1. She said, at least in Thailand, the children are hidden. Here, they're on every corner. They're in the street. She said, what's done in Thailand is hidden. Here, it's all out in the open. Can you imagine what's hidden? And so when we went, I realized it's an epidemic out of proportion, child exploitation in Brazil, and yet somebody has fudged the numbers in the reporting. And so we went from all the way to the top to the bottom, and that's why I say Brazil's a beast, because it's a very aggressive, and people, I think they don't realize even the witchcraft that's involved, the child sacrifices, all of these different things. I mean, I took the team to a cemetery where babies, are aborted babies and miscarried babies, and the whole village was known for miscarriages. And when when the women would get pregnant, they'd run up against the wall and try to create a miscarriage. And it just this crazy wickedness against children, against, and just in a different level. And so we went from the top to the bottom and found, let's say, the capital of exploitation in Brazil, where the worst of the worst, where, I mean, these children, if we're not there, literally, these children are selling their bodies for rice and beans. And so we picked 3 spots. One is the Amazon, and it's again, just an epidemic. It's been going on for a long time. And we started the first safe home there. We picked Juazeiro do Norte, which is the northeast of Brazil, where the poverty is so extreme that children sell their bodies for rice and beans. And then Rio de Janeiro, in which the most dangerous favela in the world, City of God, that there's documentaries about it.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 places that we really targeted. And really fast things happened. I met one of the head of child welfare, social welfare in the country, and she said, if you want to do what you're doing in Thailand, we need to see that you're legit, and you need to do prevention the first 2 years, and then you could start your rescue safe homes. We do family-style safe home model. It's a kind of a model that we pioneered in Thailand, and the country, actually, the government of Thailand adopted it as the model. If you want to work with children in exploitation, prevention, rescue, and heal, usually use this model of life impact. So we try to bring it to the government of Brazil, and they said, well, let us see you for 2 years prevent exploitation, and then you'll be legit enough to start rescuing, and then we'll trust you to start these safe homes. And so for 2 years, we got a crack house in the favela, and Patria was a part of that, helped us turn that crack house into a prevention center for 350 kids, where little girls that usually sell their body for cell phones would be crack addicts at 15. They're now in ballerina classes and learning their value, everything in there. We do any kind of vocational training to get them off the streets and let them know there's a way out. They don't have to be that next generation in the City of God. And then in Juazeiro do Norte, one of the most children are kidnapped at 4 years old. That's where the kids sell their bodies for rice and beans. Got a flip-flop factory, turned it into a prevention center, see another 350 kids. And then the Amazon, we started prevention first, but recently we just opened our doors to the first safe home in the interior of the Amazon, in the jungles of the Amazon. And so we're of 3 in that whole region of the Amazon. There's only 3 safe homes. And I didn't get to share this with you guys earlier at staff meeting, but actually I had meetings with the military, because you're talking the Amazon. So that's the border of Colombia. You have the guerrilla warfare, you have all the trafficking, exotic animals, lumber, drug trafficking. But the military, they have orders, even if they see a child trafficked or being exploited, they have orders to stand down, because their number one responsibility is to protect the country. So even if they see a child trafficked, they can't do anything about it.
Oh my gosh.
You have it in this epidemic proportion, but yet homes are closing down, and there's only 3 homes in all of the whole state of the Amazon in the country of Brazil. And Brazil's massive. It's 80% of Latin America. So for me, it's like I killed the lion, I killed the bear, and now this is the giant. So for me, Brazil's the giant. And so that's
Can you just give people some perspective? Last time you shared with us what wealthy individuals do across the Amazon River. Like, can you, for those that maybe haven't heard, if people want a whole recap of Life Impact and Lana's whole ministry and background, go back to that episode. Maybe we could put it in the comments or something like that, or you could just type in Lana Vasquez Beyond the Letter, you'll find it. But just to give people that little sliver about just how kind of really demonic and just gross people can be with this, like what you shared with us last time, what wealthy people do in their boats across the Amazon.
Yeah, so it's really known, especially in the Florida area, for fishing trips on these fishing boats along the waters of the Amazon. And I was actually there. I had heard about it, and that's why we were there. We called it a spy trip to see if we're going to start the homes, if it was really what everybody said. And when I was there, this just gives you perspective. They take these fishing tours, but what it is the Amazon is known for their little girls, putting their little girls on the boat, girls and boys, actually. Children don't realize that there's a lot of boys being victimized as well, and putting their girls and boys on these boats, and they have sex tourism parties, fishing, sex tourism, and actually the town that we have, our safe home, is famous for it. And what would happen, these boating companies from Florida, these areas, they take the yachts, they rent out these yachts, and they come up to these poor wooden houses, rickety houses on these waters, and there's these little rickety canoes, and they'll send their children out on that canoe. They'll tie that canoe up to the side of the yacht, and they'll go up and down those waters just having sex parties and raping those kids and doing whatever they want. And they basically said, you can hear the cries of the children on the waters of the Amazon. And I had heard this, and that's why we were there, but I was there at one of those little villages, and when we were there, we were walking around seeing it, and all of a sudden, one of those yachts pulls into like the lagoon area, and there's these 3 little girls, about 10, 11, and 12, just splashing around the water, and this guy comes out, about a middle-aged guy, 50-something, I'd say 60 because he's graying, comes out with a beer in his hand, drink in his hand, Speedos, just like whole midsection, comes out and starts calling to the little girls. Me and my team are there. We ran up there. We were just on a spy trip. We had our camera equipment, everything. We weren't doing actual rescue work. We ran up, and the yacht took off. And I saw it firsthand with my eyes, these sex tours. And what happens is that if something happens, and this happened while I was there, another trip after we'd already started to work, but if something happens to these children, what they'll do is they'll tie something heavy, throw them on the other side of the boat. Like, because if you're raping a little girl to 10, 11, and 12, and she just starts bleeding to death, if something, or they drug them, and they just start convulsing, and, if something goes wrong like that. And so they tie something heavy to them, throw them off the side of the boat, take back that wood canoe boat, and send it with a pile of money to buy the parents of silence. And you never see the kids again, and nobody hears anything again. And this happens all too much. And actually, again, it was something that I heard of. Well, when I was there was a 14-year-old girl that we were trying to work with, but she was already really in deep with the drug traffickers, and in that area, she'd really messed with them. So we were looking for her. She went missing for 2 weeks. We were trying to get her into our home and different stuff. And she went missing for 2 weeks. All of a sudden, they called me. I was on my way flying out. I was in Manaus, the capital, and they called me, and they're just crying on the other line. And they said they had tied her head to a pole, and it popped up in the water, so they were able to identify her. And they did it on purpose so that they could identify, basically as a warning, don't steal drugs, don't mess with us, we'll get you. And so they dismembered her and then tied her to something, and then at the right time it popped up, and and then we found her and knew it was her. And so this is a common practice in those waters of the Amazon. That's how gruesome, and this is what they do. So much to the point, again, I was on another flight from, I think it was Miami, to the Amazon, and I was sitting next to a doctor, and I had my shirt, and it says in Portuguese, my child, my fight, my Brazil. And it's like our battle cry for children in Brazil. And so he read Portuguese, and he was like, talking to me. And he said, I was on a medical mission trip in those waters. And he said, we pulled up to one of the villages, and everyone came out with guns, with like shotguns. And I said, what happened? He goes, well, we had to take off. So we started treating the crew, the ship crew. And he said, so they got a little loose lip, they got a little drunk, and they started talking. And they basically said, well, what happened was they were supposed to be doing medical treatments to them. They were like staged as medical treatments, and they were just raping the kids. And some of the girls came back pregnant and different things. So this is happening and it's very under the radar. We have to be very careful, because there's, just like anyone else, there was something that happened there when they were uncovering who was involved in a lot of the trafficking. Whenever you have trafficking and there's a lot of money, you have a lot of higher ups.
Right.
And so know that. Yeah. And so there was a British journalist and a Brazilian journalist, and they were kind of uncovering not even child trafficking. It was like the lumber trafficking and the other trafficking all the other stuff. And all of a sudden they just missing. It was a British. It was a foreigner. And so we have to really be careful and in that and stay under the radar. But at the same time, it's of epidemic proportion, like what's been happening and for how long it's been happening. It was crazy. One night, I knew the area that we were in was a very strategic specific area. I didn't know all the details. And I just Googled it one night, and I found out the actual town that we are in, they are known for the 10, 11, 12-year-olds to get that age group girls from the little town that we started our safe home in. They have us, it's such a big thing there that they even have a saying that the girls got pregnant from the pink dolphins at night. There's this dolphin, it's actually an ugly dolphin. And it's half gray and pink. It's a bottlenose dolphin. It's famous in the Amazon rivers. But they say, the little girls get pregnant at night from the dolphins. That's how normal this is. And in Brazil, exploitation for children is very normalized. It's very much, it's like we talked about, an over-sexualization of a generation and of a nation.
Yeah.
And so it's a very normal thing in that, and a very expected thing.
Yeah. Well, that's part of my question, and I'm curious. I don't want to condemn anyone because we're in America. There's stuff we overlook or not overlook, but rather, we have issues and things like that. And so, but it's like I know a lot of not Catholicism in Brazil, like actual Protestant Christians. I know there's a lot of Protestant churches that are very large in Brazil, and Christian movements in Brazil that are big for millennials and Gen Z, and I don't ever see any awareness or them talk about any of this, and that kind of always strikes me as odd. Is it because maybe they are doing it and they don't put it out because they obviously don't want to be killed, or is it it's just not a big deal to them, and that's one of many other sins that are going on in the area? Do you have an opinion on that?
Why do you gotta pry? Why do you gotta push the buttons?
I always gotta.
You always gotta.
I'm not doing it on purpose.
No, you're not.
I was talking to Phil or someone, and I was like, I have this genuine question because I know all these. Every time I speak to people, they're always like, "Oh, God's moving in Brazil. God's moving."
Yes.
And then I talk to you, and I'm like, I don't hear any of those movements talking about any of this stuff. And so what, what's going on?
So two things, my goodness. So two things. So I'll give you one. My goodness. Okay. So when I first landed, and one of my hosts that was taking me around, he went to a fairly large church, huge church in Rio de Janeiro, one of these churches, and he was they were taking me around, and we went to one place in one favela. And they introduced me to a 12-year-old girl who she had basically sold her body for rice and beans to the drug traffickers, and then she got involved in drugs. And her mom became a Christian, and her mom was a prostitute before, but now she wasn't a prostitute anymore. It's been 2 years, but the girl's been doing it from 10 to 12, and now she can't stop selling her body for drugs and rice and beans and different stuff. And so basically they said, we want you to meet her, we want you to talk to her. So they take me in. What had happened was she had done a bad deal with the drug dealers, and so she couldn't leave her little one bedroom where the bed's there, the toilet's there, everything's in there, or else they were going to kill her. So she hadn't been able to see the light of day for I don't even know if it was a month or 2 months, but she couldn't leave. If they saw her, she would be dead. And so we walk into this little place, and she's wearing a red bra top and these cut off shorts that everything's hanging out. And I just look at her. So they're telling me her story. The mom's saying, please pray for my daughter. We walk around, and she's just this little girl. She's just 12,
Yeah.
And so they're telling me her story. And so we walk out, I talk to her, and we get out of the room, and I'm seeing all of this all around, seeing all kinds of little girls dressed like this, doing this. And we sit down, and I just started to weep. And I had already, my first child baby victim in Thailand was a little boy that was 1.5 years that'd been messed with, and I took off his diaper, and he had been messed with all around. So I've seen some pretty hard things, so I don't just cry. You can't, when I'm in a rescue or something, I just don't go around crying everything everybody tells me. I just can't. I go more into problem solving mode.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a grace that's on me to hear these stories and stuff, but I sat there, and all of a sudden I just started to weep, because I was like, my goodness, she was 10, and now she's 12 and they can't stop getting her to do this. And she's, you know, everything like that. And I just started to, tears just started streaming down my face. And everybody's just looking around and talking about it naturally. And then talking about this other case, they're naturally telling me how an 11-year-old girl was in the bed with her mom, and the stepdad was raping both the mom and the daughter at the same time. And the daughter was holding the dad's hand saying, "Mom, make him stop, make him stop." But the mom wouldn't make him stop because she didn't want to lose the man or the money. And like, again, it was just like all these things just breaking me. And I was just like, so I finally, it was just enough. And I was like, Hai, we just need to stop for a minute. Are you translating this right to me? Am I hearing all of these stories right? Like, and he's like, yeah. And I was like, and I read him back the story about the 11-year-old, the 12-year-old we just saw, all these different things. And I was like, so this is, you're telling me this right? I heard you right. And he said, yeah. And I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yeah. And I said, why aren't you crying? Like, why aren't you have 2 little boys, like you have a wife, like, why aren't you crying, you know? And he just looked down. He's such a good-hearted guy. And he just looked down and he just thought for a minute, and he looked back up at me and he said, because Lana, this is normal here. Like, this is the reality in Brazil. And he said, this is normal here. And I just feel like they got really desensitized to what's happening. And it's really easy to fix something in somebody else's yard, or to see. It's really easy to get excited about going to Africa and going, because they speak Portuguese, so they can go to Mozambique. They can go to these different areas and get excited about Angola and doing that, and get excited about missions and these different things, than really taking care of the problem in your own backyard.
Yeah.
You know, it would be like here.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's very exciting for me to go to a missions trip, but to start talking about adoption and our social welfare system,
right.
That's a bigger giant for them, right?
Yeah.
And that's where God gave me a heart, like, for them. That's why we started the My Child, My Fight, My Brazil. These are your children. You don't need a missionary or somebody from the outside. You're a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
The church in Brazil is massive. It's a giant. These are your children. This is your country, and this is your Brazil. Like, you got it. This is your fight. If the church rised up and really took care of this, it wouldn't be an issue. You don't need missionaries here. You're strong enough.
Yeah.
We just need to wake you up and say, look at your own backyard. And so I think you get desensitized to it. It becomes normal. And then it's easier, like I said, to get excited about missions or something like that than to fix your problem right next door, or the favela right next door to you, or, you know, to see that. And I think when they see it over and over, I feel like as well, there's a lot of social projects in Brazil. Like, there's so many feeding projects, social projects. Actually, there's a lot of corruption in that. That's how they launder money. There's a lot of corruption. And so, but I think that they lost the fact of, we can go ahead and feed these kids, but if we don't bring transformation to the community, to the area, they're just going to go to hell on a full stomach.
Yeah.
And I think that edge of transformation and really changing it and getting to the roots. So I think that's another thing. I think those are 2 factors in it, because I know those movements. I was in a couple of them, and actually I hear the Brazilian side of them. My friends that are like, okay, why aren't we talking? My people that work in our projects, like, there's missions here. Before we go to Africa, before we go anywhere, there's missions here. Brazil is actually one of the sending nations for missionaries.
Really?
Yes, but again, it's more exciting. It's to go, you know, to do this or to do that, and it's more wow than to actually talk about the problems and tackle the problems that are in front of you, the giant that's in front of you, the realities that are in front of you in your own hometown, you know? And so I think it's those things. I think it's all kinds of that. I think you get desensitized. I think you stop kind of hoping, you know, in that. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. I think you start getting kind of sick of it, and you just start kind of, I don't know, you need someone with a fresh take and that's why I feel like that's why I'm sent there, not to be the missionary that goes and does it. Actually, I remember one of the girls, when we first started in Rio, she said, you need to move here. Brazil needs life impact. You need to move here. Everybody's wild about what you're doing, about everything like that. You need to move here. And I was like, no, I don't. I just need to set you on fire. I just need to activate you, and you can do it. You guys are strong. You guys are powerful. You can do it. And this comes to another point. It's crazy, because if I talk about what we're doing in Thailand, in Burma, in Brazil, people are weeping. They're on fire. it's amazing. Like, and in some of these big churches.
Yeah.
But if I for 1 second start talking about the problem
a favela
in the
something
favela
like that.
or right next door, I start talking like this. I was on one of the largest podcasts recently in October in Brazil, and you could have felt a pin drop. Like nobody wants that brought to their attention. And once I start talking about it, it's like, okay, now you're talking about my lawn. Now you're talking about my yard, And so when I do that, like as soon as I talk about Thailand, as soon as I talk about Burma, as soon as I talk about another nation, they're wild, they're crazy. But as soon as I start talking about, okay, now what are we going to do about your children? This is your child. This is your fight. This is your Brazil. What are we going to do about this? Then you could hear a pin drop. So I think it's those kinds of things that get me in trouble.
Well, that's where I'm genuinely curious about, because I hear regularly how and I'm not diminishing it. I don't really know any Brazilians. I know of Brazilians and I know of churches and ministries and stuff, but I don't know anyone personally that I could. And I'm, the way I am, I'm very much like I'm inquisitive. And so like if I met a Brazilian pastor, I'd be like, hey, here's what I've heard. What, how does it make sense on a ministry side of things and stuff like that? Because, if I hear often, like a side of a coin where there's a story that's like Brazil's on fire for God, they're experiencing revival. Maybe I just see and define revival a little bit differently. Are they merely talking about like salvation, like a church attendance? Like, oh, people are coming into church? Is that that kind of how?
Yes, because I can take you, and I took the Patriot team actually in one town in the Northeast in particular. It is the capital for child exploitation. So there's churches on every corner in Brazil. There's even in the favelas we're in, there's they call them, though, money men. There's a lot of traditional churches. There's a lot. It's another career. Like everybody's a pastor, a pastor's daughter, a pastor's son, or something like that. So there is, and not, I mean, there's legit, what I mean?
No,
So yes,
there's
it's mainly in
like,
the church. It's mainly a lot of salvations. The churches are exploding. They are doing great. But when in these other regions, like these destitute regions, so the one region that we're in, there's this huge statue of this saint guy. And actually it's crazy because I was raised Catholic. And my family's charismatic Catholic, actually.
Okay.
And so they say we're born again Catholics.
Yeah.
And so we went and they took us. The statue's probably as big as the Jesus statue, and it's a statue of this patron saint, and he's famous. I mean, they come and they do a lot of tourists. Kind of the Brazilians come.
They come.
And
it's not Pio Project.
No. We won't say him. We won't say him.
Okay.
Because it's a huge deal, And so so they come, and they come from all over, and it's a big thing. And this is actually how child exploitation started in the city. What would happen is they do their religious pilgrimage to this area, and they do it where they would, walk on their knees up to the statue. They would, beat
the religious
themselves,
devotion
all of
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
So what would happen is back in the day, there was no hotels, there was nothing for them to stay because it's just an old town with the statue. And so the people would offer their houses for them to stay. And what they would do is they would go and stay in their like vehicles in the front or stay somewhere else or camp out in front. And they would offer the people the inside of their house, and they would leave their children inside. And that's how exploitation started there. But they also say it's because he had a room up there in his church, so to say, where they said, oh, and this is where he took in the street boys, and this is where the street boys would sleep. And so, but this is a crazy thing. I went into there and we did a whole tour. And so the lady, she was showing me, this is his sitting room, this is this room, and then they do things to like carve out images of what you wanted healed. He was a miracle worker, healing worker. So they carve out images of, if you want your hand, like whatever body part. So you go into these rooms and they have body parts like all over carved out of wood, because he would do miraculous things. And then they had wedding dresses there, and they would come and like give offerings for the wedding dresses if they wanted to get married, or if they wanted their husbands to come back, all this stuff. So anyways, it was that's how this town was formed. That's what this town was formed on. And so there was a lot of stuff happening with the children. Well, when she's touring us around and we get to the end, and I'm looking around, and being raised Catholic, like there's usually a cross or Jesus hanging somewhere or something like that. There was nothing nothing in any of this. And she's talking about him like she's just memorized, and she's so proud of him. So anyways, at the end, I started to talk to her, and so I, put my hand on her hand. I said, I was raised Catholic too, but I don't see any statues of Jesus, or I don't see any cross of anything with Jesus. And I said, let me tell you my story. So I started to tell her my story. And to me, I believed in Jesus. He was on the cross, but I didn't know how to ask him off that cross and into my heart, into my life. I believed in him, but he was like a president, someone famous. I didn't know how to basically encounter him and ask him to be real in my everyday life. So do you want to encounter Jesus, make him real in your everyday life? Do you want him not only to be the savior of the world, but to be your savior? So I told her all of this, and I had my hand on her, and literally in a different voice, she said, get off me. And I said, have you ever heard of Jesus before? And she said, no. And I said, who have you heard of? And she said, this saint. She had never heard of Jesus before. There are towns that are built on child exploitation that have never heard of Jesus in Brazil. There are town regions in the Amazon that had never heard of Jesus in Brazil. Like that town I told you about that has a baby cemetery that did child sacrifices. And what had happened was there's a lot of... It's mixed. It's not the traditional Catholicism that we would know here in California.
It'd be like Santa Maria, Mexico, and stuff like that, like a distorted Catholicism.
Even more because of the slaves that they brought from Africa during that time. It's mixed with a macumba, which is an African witchcraft. So it's mixed with like literal witchcraft. So they have the witchcraft doctors, everything like that, and so it's all kind of mixed together with child sacrifice and everything at a whole nother level. And so you're in there, and that's the town we're in. And it is, I'm talking, you want to talk about darkness? It's one of the darkest areas I've ever been in my life. And it's in Brazil. Like, I'm not talking, I wasn't in, know what I mean? Like, it was one
You're not thinking of like a corner of a third world country that has, total lawlessness or abuse. It's a developed nation with,
And literally, right there, never heard about Jesus. And it's very common in that whole region, in that whole area. So that's why I say, like, the church needs to look up and look out. Like, I think they're getting really good at looking out, which is awesome, but we have to look up to the one that's around us. That has to be equally important. And so that's my take on it.
And so, like, Protestant churches locally there that are maybe, you said more so like on mission, would look like any of ours in the States. Would their teachings and preaching like preach against those things, or is there like hey, we don't want to touch that because there's I know, like, commonly in Mexico, I know the situation where there was a pastor in a city in Mexico, and he started reaching the prostitutes, started preaching the gospel, and they would feed them and all these things like that. Well, lo and behold, he leads like half of the prostitutes in that city to Jesus, and he baptizes them in like trash cans, these prostitutes. Oh, wow. And so, like, total transformation. Yeah. Well, because of that, the prostitutes, they stopped working. Yeah. Well, the cartel came in and killed him and put him in a trash can in the center of the city. Wow. And basically was like, you want to baptize him in trash cans, we'll put you in a trash can. And I think, I don't want to overexert the story, but I think he might have even put his family in the trash cans as well, and killed them. And so basically all the churches locally were just like, well, we're not going to outreach prostitutes anymore. We're going to preach to everyone else, and we're going to, but like, we're not talking to, and there's a side of our faith that go, you need to be more bold and put your life on the line. And then there's the real, real human side that goes like, well, this natural like fear and of persecution that we may have. And there's tons of scriptures, for it. But again, it's different when it's in your own backyard or your own case. Would that be an example of like Brazil? Is there a fear around retaliation that like people wouldn't touch, or they're out there preaching against? They're preaching against macumbe and stuff like that, or like what's the actual like teaching and preaching and awareness of these things going on in more of a traditional like non-Catholicized or anything church?
So I know the local pastors that are really boots on the ground, like in the favelas or in that area. I was just with one. We're going to do a thing together. But she said when she first came in, like their lives were threatened over and over. Like, and actually, I know a pastor's wife, just some different things had happened. And so they really come under fire, and they're really courageous. I know some other ones that are corrupt in the favelas that the drug traffickers will come to them and say, bless us, pray for us. We're going to go out.
Yeah.
So they do
like
have
the John
to be
Wick
careful.
Level stuff.
Yes, they do have to be crazy careful. There's a lot of politics that are involved in a lot of stuff too. And so there is crazy politics in the church and different stuff like that that's going on at those levels because the politicians will go into these poor areas and buy votes and different things. And get involved in the church. And it's a big, ugly mess. And so I know those different things. I just think, honestly, and this is sad, I'm sorry, but I feel like for Brazil, as the West goes, like Brazil looks up to us. They look up to, they would look up to the big churches and the mega churches and what we're doing.
I know that to be true. There's Brazilian pastors always here in the States. What
are they doing? What is the new? And so I think that's more it. When your eyes are focused on that, you can't be focused on the other. You understand? So I think that they're looking at that's more the heart. And again, the social projects have been left to the people that are just, called to the social projects. You know what I mean? Or the people that are supposed to just do the social projects. It's not a part of, no, this is the church. This is the hope of the world. No, you are the church. Like all of us are supposed to be doing something, not just a missionary, not just this is the church as well. This is part of the church as well. So I think I think that's what they're looking at instead of this. Like, how can we grow this way instead of how can we grow this way? And I don't want to act like I'm a, specialist on it. Obviously, I haven't been there long. When I'm there, I like to listen. I like to watch. I talk to the pastors, and we work through the local churches. I have a Brazilian father. That's how I got into Brazil. Was I went to Bible school with him, and so he is like my Brazilian pastor, Brazilian father, and so we work. I believe that anything that God's going to do on the earth, He does it through the church, and so I would like for the church to be more involved. And so we do operate, but it is for they're off to what's the next Western thing that the church is doing, and if it's not reaching this or if it's not doing that, then that's not it. You know what I mean? And so that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. And we know the Western church and the American church is far from perfect. And so, I mean, even on this podcast, we talk about how, our American church falls short in so many areas at times. And it's true. I mean, I think that, there's a lot. Everybody has difficulties. I think part of the United States difficulty with, sex trafficking and even the type of demonic activity that may happen in other areas is number one. Satan's greatest deception in America is us thinking he doesn't exist. And so it's a different type of deception. It's not an outright greed or an outright abuse. We look at what happens in Mexico or other places. I just talking to my mom the other day because we're going to Mexico on vacation, and she's like, where you're going is going to be safe, right? And I was like, Mom, our own city's not safe. Like, what do I could pull up the news right now and show you what, Target was robbed or whatever, it's like, and so it's a concept of like, we live in this bubble of kind of obscurity and government protected and funded everything in the United States. And like, because even in the sense of like, as churches, if you want to get involved in foster and adoption, it's like there's a lot of a lot of them are good, but there's a lot of government protection where it takes years and all this money and all these things like that, and because they don't want the child to be abused and all these things, they're protected things, but it also then becomes a lot of people go, well, it's just impossible. We can't put our hands in it.
Yes.
Whereas though, like, there was a day and age in America where those type of legal boundaries weren't there, which gave inception to places like Salvation Army and others, all these incredible movements that still exist that kind of rooted from America, from the desire to do more ground-to-ground outreach. Yeah. And I see what you're saying in the sense that, like, if a lot of churches, which I know it because we are a church and I'm involved nationally in other things, like most countries religiously, or at least in the non-denominational church, they do look at America and say, what are you guys doing systematically? Yes. But what they're also not aware of is, like, we have our own politics and our own regulations that are keeping us from stuff that maybe if we had the opportunity, we would be far more involved in, which also leads to a lot of churches' missionary support to say, hey, let's go into these areas. It's a good response that you give, because I'm just curious because, Thailand's different. I know that there's not churches on every corner in Thailand. I know that there's not an awareness even of who Jesus is. But then I get told about Brazil, and it's like, it's a Christian nation, and we vote lately conservatively and all these other things like that. And you would think then that there would be, it would be louder.
Yes.
I'm not saying they got to fix the problem, but it would at least be like, if I'm hearing about revival, I would think then, and there's also this move to end X, Y, and Z, and I don't hear that simultaneously with the statement of revival.
Yes.
And Brazil is more aggressive, so they could. That's why I'm saying, like, they don't need, when I'm there, there's not actually a lot of missionaries there. A lot of Brazilians are the missionaries. So when I'm there, I'm with all locals all the time, in different states all the time, all with Brazilians. We have one missionary at one of our projects, but that's the only foreigner that I see. And so they can do it. Like, there is an aggressiveness, but I think that it is, again, this big problem that is so deep and so rooted, like you said, and so much corruption, so much red tape, so many different things. And so I do think that it is way more layered than that as well. But they do have the strength, and they do have the power, and they can do it. And I believe that that's why we're there. We're there to get in their face and say, no, this is your nation. These are your children. This is your fight. You can do it, and really push and prod and wake the giant. Yeah,
that's good. I mean, because sometimes you need, like right now, I've heard some of the statistics that right now, on average, majority of missionaries globally that are in the United States are coming to the United States as missionaries. So even the U.S. has become a missions place where we used to be known, and we still are. We send missionaries, but a lot of people in other countries are choosing America to come and do missions, in our backyard. And then when you hear that, like if you meet someone from Africa or the Philippines and they're like, oh, I'm a missionary. And you're like, oh, what country are you at? And you're like, I'm here. I'm doing missions here in the U.S. And you're like, no, I don't know how I feel about that, because that's our problem. Like, we need to be, what problem are you fixing that we as a Christian nation can't fix? So then that means it does show a moral decline, right? It shows a secularization of society. It shows that our moral standards have waned, which has devalued the gospel and the needs for the church. And I think in a level with you being in Brazil, to somewhat, quote unquote, have someone from the outside go, hey, you care about our problems more than we do. Well, we're a lot of us are Christian. How then we need to partner with you and help you in this solution. You mentioned that, like, obviously what you're doing at times is very dangerous, and you have to use a lot of wisdom and a lot of discernment. Like, for yourself, when you feel like, maybe you call it whatever you want, but like fear, this like trepidation to move forward. I mean, I know you're in City of God and Amazon and all these places that I think the average person would especially the average American would be like, I'm not comfortable with that. And most of them would just be like, no, I'm not doing that. When like that fear sets in, how do you drive past that?
Okay, can I shelve that really quick? Because I just remembered the main answer to your question about Brazil. And I forgot, this is the main answer, actually. Brazil is a save-face nation. It's a shame culture, just like Thailand is.
Okay.
So it is, if you look, it's a shame culture. So basically, if you say something like that, it'll cause them to lose face. It'll bring shame. And so that's why they don't want to deal with it in that. And so whenever you start addressing these issues and then admitting it, it causes, that. And so actually that is part of it right there. That's one of the main reasons. So now fear. And I really hate that this is my answer. I really believe that we were created to do what I was created to do what we're doing. We are all created to do what we're doing. And I do what I'm created for. I have a big Mexican dad, huge Mexican. You've met him. He loves Patria. He loves it here. And so I have a very big Mexican dad. I was raised around
big Mexican guys. I was, around gangs and different things. And so I never, I can really mark it at one moment in my life. I think I was about 13, and we were over down in the LA garment district, and my dad, because he's built like half of LA, he would give us $100 for Christmas, and at 100, like at that age, you're like 1,000, and say go wild at the garment district. And so I'd get all of my stuff at the garment, 13 or 14, I think it might have been 14, and go wild at the garment district. Well, one time we were walking and we're passing through Skid Row, and I just remember a guy rolled out in front of me, and I was walking next to my dad. He rolled out in front of me. His eyes were bloodshot red and just looked at me like, I'm going to kill you. And I just remember my dad was right there, and he just like kind of like went like this, and he whispered in my ear, and he said, don't worry, I'm right here. Nothing's going to happen to you. And that marked my life forever, and if you're my story, me and my dad were estranged for a while, and, they divorced at 14, but something was put in me at that moment, like a fearlessness, honestly, to where I got in a lot of trouble as a kid, but it was because I was, and as a teenager and a young adult, because I was fearless, like just fearless. And I believe that all of those things that God has used now. So honestly, to tell you the truth, the only time I have fear, like when I'm in City of God in the favela, it is the craziest thing. I feel so protected. Like and I have a crazy story to tell you, but there was one time we were going to a different one. It's owned by the Red Command, basically, which is one of the most dangerous cartels in Colombia. They originate out of Colombia, and they run everything in Brazil. Actually, all the weapons, everything comes from Colombia into Brazil, and so they're all connected. And it's this area, and it's actually City of God is very famous, but this one is very dangerous. And so, literally, at one point, one of the presidents, he would just in the helicopter ride over the top and like shoot down, like with a gun, just shoot down, because you're either a drug trafficker, the kid gonna be a drug trafficker, or the girlfriend of a drug trafficker and going to raise a drug trafficker. So your life meant nothing. And so we were driving in, and actually the pastor that we were going in with, we were looking at a school we were going to support, and we're going to do a prevention center there. And so the pastor we went in with, he discipled another pastor, and he used to be one of the main drug guys there, and he got saved, and he was a pastor now. Wow. And so he was leading us in. So he had to sit in the front, and it was like a little minivan, minibus thing. So we're going through, there's a 16-year-old with a semi-automatic weapon just pointed, not blinking, just like red eyes, just like this, not blinking. And when you go into these favelas, you have to roll down the window and you have to turn on the hazard lights. And so we're going through, and he's not moving. Like one slip and he could shoot us. And so we're going through, and then they said, hey, actually they're doing a police operation. They didn't get their money. And so we need to, be careful. Cuidado. We have to be careful. And so we all got out, and the guy looked and he said, if we say run, And so we're like, okay. And so we're walking around, and I see.
Well, when you hear that, though, are you like, or you're just like, all right.
No. I'll tell you, this is so crazy. So all of a sudden, like there's 15-year-olds with like a pistol in their back pocket, riding on the bikes, and everyone's just going around, and they're pointing out, and we're walking up to this school, and all of a sudden I hear, bah, 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 bah. And it was so close, and I've smelled gun smoke before, but I smelled gun smoke, and I was like, and they said that the what is that? It's a tank. So the police tank was there, and it was shooting as well. And so all of a sudden, like, it was so close that I thought maybe I was hit, and I couldn't feel it because of the adrenaline. Right. So I went like this, and I was like, am I shot? And all of a sudden the guy looks at me and goes, run! And so we start running, and it's uphill, and he was trying to block me, but he was super skinny. And so he's trying to block me. So I was laughing because he's like this running, and I'm like, that bullet's going to go right through him and hit me. And I thought it was the funniest thing because he's like this. I'm like, he's not blocking anybody. I need to block him. And I'm laughing as I'm running. I'm just laughing. It's hilarious to me in my brain. All of a sudden we get into the school, and everyone just hit the ground. Everyone started praying. The pastors started praying that we were there. All of a sudden the main pastor's phone rings. And he picks it up, and he goes, yes, yes. And my interpreter looks over at me, and she just turns white as a ghost. And then he looks at me and just turns white as a ghost. And I'm like, what? What's happening? And they said, that was our intercessor, my prayer girl. Whenever I'm going into dangerous places, I tell this prayer mama to cover me in prayer. And he said, and I forgot to tell her today, but she called, and she said, I perceive that you're in danger. And for some reason, there's somebody with you that is very important and very special. And there were angels dispatched, and that person's life is being protected. And because of that person, all of your guys' lives are going to be spared. And so you don't have to worry. And they all looked at me and he goes, that person's you. And we just like this holy awe just came in that room. And so I think I'm in the will of God and doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, and that was another marker. And so we left, and actually when we came down, this is true story. I have pictures. When we came down, the pastor's, he is like in a Fortuner, like a CRV, so his driver's side was shot through from that tank. So the driver of the pastor got out to get water. And when he got out to get water, he was staying with the vehicle because it's dangerous. They'll just rob everything, and you'll be back and take the tires and everything. So he's staying with the vehicle. And when he came back, there was a bullet hole straight through from the tank when he got out to get water. We literally had to leave the pastor's car there. I had to give him a little offering. I felt so bad, everything, So we went back and we were talking to the insurance. None of the insurance companies would go into the most dangerous area to go pick up that car and get it fixed. And so anyways, we get back. I'm talking to the team, and the team's all talking, and they're like, what just happened? Da, da, da. And they're talking in Portuguese, and they're like, Loca, why in the world were you laughing? They're like, why were you smiling? Are you really crazy? We're scared now. Are you crazy? And they're like, tell me now, are you crazy? But I really just thought, people have died in so many ways. You can die in an airplane crash. You can die in a car accident. You can die in so many ways. How awesome is it to die, living in the will of God, doing something like that. And I say, okay, at least if my bones were buried in that place, it would cause revival. They would know somebody came here to give their life, and maybe all these drug traffickers will get saved. That's the best way in my eyes to die, we're going to die sometimes. Why not die that way, And I don't know, not obviously everybody thinks like that. And maybe if I had kids and a husband, it wouldn't be, you know what I mean? And now I think, things are set up for the promised land, who's going to run that. And I have to be responsible in all my responsibilities, and who's going to succeed, and who's going to, all these different things. But I think it's at that point where it's just there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. And I feel like I'm in the center of the will of God. I have no regrets. I look back, and there's a fearlessness that I have to have, I think, going in these areas. And I think in that, and it was put in me as a young girl, and then always just confirmed in those times. So negotiating with drug traffickers in Thailand, talking to the third in command. Yeah, I remember I told the story at Patriot about when we were talking about the building and different things. The third in command, the money runner, he was talking to me, and I felt in my heart, pray for him. And I asked him, can I pray for you? And he's the third, he's the money runner. So you have number one, number two, and he's there taking videos, sending it up to number one and number two. We get in a room, and he's telling me, thank you for what you're doing for our children, da, 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 da. And I said, can I pray for you? And he said, yes, very serious. And so I start praying for him. And I just remember the word that the Lord gave me, the blood of Jesus is more powerful to wash the blood that's on your hands and the torment that's on your hands. And as I started praying, he started shaking a little bit, and I just and then kind of just prayed a prayer at the same time, and I said, and whoever calls on the name of Jesus shall be saved, amen. And I remember he looked at me, and I looked at him, and his eyes were full of tears. Now, if I was scared, I didn't know what he was going to do, you know what I mean? He could have killed me, he could have whatever. And so I think at those moments, I'm created to do exactly what I'm doing, and I hate that I have that answer, because some people need to do it afraid, you can't, and so I know that for most people, they have to do it afraid. You just have to step out afraid, and you have to, that's all it is. Fear is false evidence appearing real. It's just a smoke screen. And once you step out, you see, and you step through that smoke screen, you see what's on the other side. And so I know that that's normally the normal everyday person, but I really feel like I'm created to do exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And God put moments in my life just to reinforce and to put fearlessness in my heart to do exactly what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What do you mean? That's a great answer. I mean, you're clearly anointed, for the work that you do, and clearly, the Lord is protecting you and has given you a boldness and awareness that not that only you can do, but you are one of the only ones doing what you're doing with the level of boldness that you have, and that's clearly something that the Spirit of God is doing, which is powerful. Because I think the average person does look at what you're doing and would think the same thing. I just think this woman's crazy. She's got to be crazy, or care about something more than, her life, or when God anoints you for some type of work, like God anoints everybody for different types of work. And then there are certain things that, like you said, like some people, they're going to be called to it, they're going to be anointed to do it, and they got to do it with fear, right? Like with Elijah, and, he goes to the cave and he's scared, and, the Lord says, eat some food, take a nap, and get back out there. Yeah. And then there's other moments that, for some individuals, God just says, hey, for the level of where I'm going to take you, it's just, I'm going to remove this thing from you so that you could just run further, faster, and higher, which is incredible. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it. It's always good to catch up. Our church loves you, but also you share with me something I didn't know, that our last episode, you got a staff member from our last episode. Yes. So P, she heard about you from this episode, and now she's running all your media, right?
Yes,
like your social media and videos and all that stuff.
She's killing it.
She's so
doing
gifted.
Amazing. She is. Video, photography, all of it. Yeah. She's taken us to a whole nother level.
Oh, that's amazing. You. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that. You told me today that she didn't know who you guys were until our last podcast, which is absolutely incredible that's happened. So, I pray everybody stays connected with everything that Lana and her team are doing. We'll have some information in the show notes, but their ministry is Life Impact International, and doing incredible work in Thailand and incredible work in Brazil, Burma, and I know you got a lot of other places in your heart as well. So you can either, support them by following them on Instagram, social media. You can go to their website. If you want to donate to what they're doing, please go and do that. You could give whatever God would put on your heart, and it'll continue to go towards their ministry and their mission to rescue children and support families, which is amazing. So thank you so much for being here today.
You, sir.
Yeah, appreciate you. All right, everybody. God bless. Bye.